Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Doreen Malavano. I'm a business psychologist. I'm also a British Psychological Society certified psychometric test user and administrator, which means I am certified to use and administer any psychometric assessments in terms of their work context. In terms of my own professional background, I have a Master's of Science in Work Psychology or Business Psychology and an undergraduate in psychology, but also I've worked in people development from different angles, including counseling, training, and most recently, leadership development. And I currently lead the Zanga Research and Product Development Unit. So I'm very excited to be joining you today with the webinar of the month, which we'll be discussing as introduced the pillar of mindset, which is one of the pillars in our leadership competency framework. So um, to go over the contents of what we'll be covering in this session today, I'll be introducing the leadership competency framework, the Zanga Metrics. But also, like mentioned before, we're going to focus specifically on mindset. And so we'll be defining mindset, reviewing some evidence or research around the pillar of mindset. And then we'll be looking at competencies because mindset stands as a pillar and it has some competencies within it that we'll be discussing before looking at the assessment, the Zanga individual assessment, and how it assesses a person's mindset. And also, I'll be talking about then what can we do about all that we have shared and all that has been hopefully learned by the end of the session. And my colleague Amadeus is going to come in as well to collect your questions that will be addressed later. So, without further ado, the Zanga Leadership Competency Framework is a framework that includes 14 competencies that fall under 4 pillars. And what these competencies are, or what competency frameworks are in general, it's a set of knowledge, skills, and abilities that contribute to superior performance in the workplace. And this comes, the aspect or the um, context of competency frameworks comes from the understanding and a lot of research that has been done to identify what differentiates one person's performance from another. And there's a lot that contributes to that. And one of the major things being technical background and technical expertise. But beyond person's technical abilities in delivering for the role that they're in, there's often some additional skill, some additional knowledge, some additional ability that differentiates people even of the same technical ability, of the same background, of the same roles in terms of their performance. And so different companies, industries have this set of competencies that they have identified as being crucial to superior performance in that role or in their company. And a lot of famous companies have their own competency frameworks. And so people will be trained against, they'll be evaluated against these competency frameworks at different levels of their career. They'll be trained against these as well to develop these skills, knowledge, and abilities. And they will be also asked and motivated to emulate these competencies for superior performance. And so Zanga has worked for more than 10 years on the continent in Africa, but also beyond. And these are the competencies that we have identified from our work with leaders and professionals from different walks of life as being very key to superior performance, key to good performance in the workplace. And as I said, there's 14 competencies grouped under the 4 pillars, which are on your screen. The four pillars being mindset, relationships, leadership, and execution. And so we are going to today be discussing mindset and taking a deeper dive into what is constituted in the pillar of mindset, how we assess it, and how exactly you can develop it. So mindset is a very common word, especially in the professional context. And so just the psychological definition of mindset itself is these are the beliefs, the attitudes, essentially the mental framework which guide how people, leaders, non-leaders, interpret situations and also choose what actions to take in different situations. So everybody has a unique uh, there, there's unique there's a unique mindset that you have, and this is influenced by our backgrounds, our cultures, our experiences, and what we have come to form as our understanding of the world. So as a leader, a person who is a manager, team leader, head of department, or even individual contributor, because in your own way you're still leading and influencing yourself to perform or achieve certain things in the workplace, your mindset influences all that you do. And in terms now of a leader and how what they think about the world or how they process everything around the world, what is at stake or what is affected by this includes their culture of the organization. So what they set up as norms and traditions and expectations for behavior for other people based on how they think, but also it goes out then to influence employee motivation. So what pushes employee to perform or do their tasks or even go beyond, but also openness to innovation. So, and this we will we'll also consider it. We'll also discuss a bit more about some work that has been done to identify different types of mindset. But if a leader, for instance, is not open to feedback, is not open to learning, is and views feedback as something that is scary or something that is like disrespectful for people to give, then they're limiting how much they're learning from the people they lead, but also how they're able to innovate as an organization and adapt to new demands and changes. And so, and there's been a lot of I've encountered a lot of different perspectives on whether mindset as a quality is something that can be developed. And I welcome you at this point to share in the chat what you think about mindset, is whether it's a quality that can be developed as one is an adult and has formed, um, I guess, their own beliefs. Do you think it's something that can be changed? Do you think it's something that can be improved? Or do you think it's pretty solid by the time somebody's an adult? So I welcome you to share your insights on the chat. But also, I will share some insight on this in terms of work that has been done um, by different psychologists to identify or to expand on mindset and how it comes to be formed and how it's developed. So Carol Dweck, who is a psychologist who's done a lot of work um, on mindset, has classified mindset into two. And her classification is might be a bit common, might be one that you've heard before. She classifies a person's mindsets or mental frameworks into two. One is a growth mindset, is a people who or individuals, or this mindset includes believing that ability in general can be developed. Um, and the other one is a fixed mindset, which is believing that abilities are innate, that you either are able to maybe lead and manage or not. You either are able to be creative or you either are able to do a certain level of tasks or not. And so from the research that is done by Carol, um, it has been found that leaders who have a growth mindset are more likely to engage in effective leadership behaviors. So, um, adapt their behavior, for example, in order to influence people, to motivate people, to have some individualized consideration for people, but also to foster some cultures that encourage learning, encourage innovation. But those who have fixed mindsets are less likely to do so. So they're not as likely to welcome challenges, for example. They will most likely see a challenge as a threat instead of an opportunity to develop and to grow and to learn. they'll be preferring what is familiar to them, and change is something that is scary and perhaps even avoided with leaders who have a fixed mindset. And so it's possible that people have fixed mindset in terms or the beliefs are a bit rigid about certain things and more flexible about others. That's possible. But as a leader, having a growth mindset is something that enables you to adapt to situations as you need to. As you know, different situations, different people require different skills and strategies in order to be influenced and to um, get the outcome that you're anticipating from them. So it enables you to be resilient. So again, in the face of a lot of challenges, I think in our previous webinar, we discussed just how uh, just how volatile the markets are, just how a lot of digital transformation is happening on the continent and outside in the wider world in general, and how having this fixed mindset might then be a challenge. It might be a challenge for a leader with a fixed mindset to deal with and adapt in face of such big changes. And so another key aspect of work that is affected by a leader's mindset is psychological safety. So psychological safety might be again something you've heard of before. Depends on how much you're in the I guess work psychology space. Um, Psychological safety is refers to a tendency by employees to be not scared, to be encouraged, but also to feel like they're safe, to provide feedback and to communicate upwards, that is with their leaders, managers, etc., without fear of negative consequences coming out of their communication. And so, with leaders who have a fixed mindset and are not open to learning, not open to challenges, they might create, it's very possible that they'll create an environment where people are less likely to share and are in fear of um, the consequences that might come out of them sharing information, especially if it's information about issues that they're facing in the workplace. And so there's quite a few other mindset classifications. This is the most famous one and I guess the most referenced one. But there are other psychologists, but also um, book authors who have done some work and expanded upon things like a global mindset, which is essential for leadership, especially in like multicultural environments, and helps leaders navigate ambiguity in order to achieve global success, which is has been identified as key to increasingly globalized world, but also globalized work arrangements. But also there's the positive mindset, which is um, again staying positive and seeing the good side or the advantages, trying to see advantages in situations. This is not to be confused or that just that a warning that comes out of having a positive mindset or a different. The other side of it is the toxic positivity, which in wherein people focus only on the positive and do not address any negative issues that happen in the workplace, which again foster stress. It doesn't foster good adaptability, but also um, the paradox mindset, which this is where people are able to embrace tensions and contradictions that enable them to drive creativity, but also thrive in dynamic context. Another type of mindset that you might have or not encountered is the infinite mindset. This is popularized by the author Simon Sinek, where he talks about infinity or a mindset having to be one that believes that there's infinite possibilities in business, in work. There's infinite players, so eh, this enables leaders to get out of the fixation, for example, with the direct competition, but also they're changing rules. That this could be the rules. Um, Maybe now, for example, what the rule is or what seemed to be the norm before things like COVID is office arrangement or office work, and then the rules changed, and after COVID, we see a lot of more people doing remote work and people having to lead um, remote teams or hybrid teams, being some an adjustment to kind of the game that has been made. And so this is just again to further elaborate on how um, a leader's mentor framework affects those around them and how it's been theorized by psychologists, but also by different leadership authors. So now there's a quick poll, and I'll give you a minute here to answer the question. Okay, let's go. So let's now move on to look at the specific competencies. These are the knowledge, skills, and abilities that we um, that are included under the pillar of mindset in the Zanga Leadership Competency Framework. So there's four competencies: resilience, ownership, excellence, and ethics. And when we talk about resilience, here we're looking at how a person is able to adapt to changing circumstances and ambiguity. So whether they're able to persevere in light of challenges, in light of changing dynamics and changing to the rules of the game, for lack of a better um, comparison, but also whether they're able to remain optimistic as they deal with all of these changes and demands that come with leading, especially in high context cultures. And so true resilience is when they're able to push forward in adversity, but also bounce back when there's challenges, when there's differences, when there's unexpected changes in what they're doing, but also stretch themselves in terms of their potential, aim to go beyond perhaps or deal with things beyond what they've dealt with historically in order to advance, in order to lead effectively in what they need to do. And so the second competency that we that is included in the Zanga competency framework under mindset is ownership. And so this refers to one's attitude towards responsibility, but also accountability. Is one or has one mastered um, the um, the attitude or their attitude in terms of taking responsibility and accountability for their work, but also for the outcomes and the decisions that they make. So when a person is able to take accountability for their work, own their work, um, follow up proactively with what they're required to do, and are willing to own both when they fail and when they succeed in the role, then they're demonstrating they're more likely to be effective in their leadership. Um, but also they will encourage, they're setting up such a good example as leaders, as models to the people that they lead, to take responsibility for their work, to take ownership of the work that they do, to own both, again, success and failure, and be able to share what they're experiencing within the process, even as a learning point for other people. And so this is the second competency within the mindset pillar. The third one is excellence, which is related to ownership. Now, excellence relates to the attitude towards the standard of work that a person does. Okay, you're taking ownership of your work. Okay, you're addressing and admitting when you're accountable for certain um, actions and their outcomes. But what standard are you holding yourself to when you're doing that work? And so this includes things like being detail oriented, continuously striving to do things better. Again, relates to stretching your potential, like I was discussing in the ownership competency. And so this is, like I said, these competencies are interrelated, but they all reflect on or all related to the mental framework and of a leader, of a mental framework of how and attitudes of a person who's being assessed, for example, with our assessment. And so with excellence, the aim of this competency, or the positive outcome of this competence, is that people are able to elevate their performance, they're able to elevate their outcomes, both for themselves and for others. If excellence is a standard, if excellence is a value that you communicate within your team, within your organization, and you also model it, then it's very likely that people will also have high standards for their work based on the standards and expectations that you're setting for the people that you lead. And the last but not least on this under this pillar is ethics. Ethics is the internal compass that is guiding behavior, integrity, and fairness around the workplace. And so, what we are looking at with this competency is, or what is included, things like honesty, whether people are able to communicate with with honesty to the people they lead, to peers, to managers, and etc. But also transparency. So being able to share um, key information, for example, regarding to change and other information that is key for people to have, especially when we're looking to build and maintain trust within teams and organization. Um, what is the person's attitude? What is the leader's attitude towards ethic, towards being transparent? And how do they act according to the values? It could be values. Now, there's a lot of values that influence a person's behavior. A personal, somebody has their own personal values based on their maybe family upbringing, cultural influence, but there's also often also organizational values in terms of standards for behavior and integrity within that organization. And then there's also wider community or cultural values that can influence the behaviors of people within that group or within that company because they exist in the wider context. And so, with this competency, and especially one thing that is unique about our assessment, is we recognize the cultural um, influences, how they can show up in the workplace, how they can um, influence people's behaviors, and also in that way their outcomes in the organization. And so, in addition to getting insight from our individual assessment tool, which we'll be discussing next, in addition to getting insight about um, your ethics or your level of mastery in terms of ethics, there is also additional insight on cultural dimensions, where we give insight on cultural values that are likely to influence individual behavior, especially in high context cultures. And a person is able to reflect, giving opportunity to a person to reflect on how these values show up in their day to day work and how they're affecting their outcomes. So, I mentioned the assessment tool. So, what we have done with the framework, the competency framework, is we have an individual competency assessment, leadership competency assessment. And the way that this is accessed is it's through an online questionnaire, which um, essentially a person is able to complete and get after they complete the questionnaire. It will take maybe 20-25 minutes. They're able to get insights on these competencies that are being discussed. So since today we're focusing on the first pillar and its competencies, that is mindset, and the competencies that are resilience, ownership, excellence, and ethics, what I have here is an example of the insight that you can expect to gain from completing our assessment or the questionnaire. So you will get some insight on the level of mastery of that you have achieved or you're operating at the current moment with relation to each of the competencies, but also you will get some insight or just a bit more information. So what does it mean? So for example, here on the left, we have the overall competency level, and these are on a standard 10 or 10-10 scale. Um, Overall STEM score for the pillar mindset. And then it's further broken down when you go further to right into the individual um, competencies and the scores. And while it's easy to say, for example, in this case, to say, yay, there's mastery on three different competencies, in the report and in the feedback that you get, there is further reflection that you're able to get in terms of what can you do to maintain that mastery? What can you do to increase the influence, but also, for example, through training and mentoring people so that they also benefit from that mastery that you've been able to achieve in terms or relation to that competency. So that's what you see here on the left. The top being the insight on what is the level of competency, level of mastery, or that you're operating at currently in terms of that competency. And below it is further insight that you can expect. So if it's a current strength, it will tell you and make you aware of perhaps the ways that this is showing up in your work and encourage you to, which encourages you that in that aspect you're doing something right. And people can use that as well to learn. And so, or can learn from you. And so this assessment and the feedback report is very useful for situations like coaching, but also for self-awareness, and also for team development. So uh, the first step that we recommend when it comes to developing leader mindset, as we have identified, it's very key. It affects not only how a person operates, but also the wider team and the wider culture, the team psychological safety as well. The first step that we'd recommend is to measure or identify the need for what needs to be developed. And so for example, from our report here, you can see, for example, excellence is a competency that needs to be developed that we'd recommend. And so whatever interventions that comes after that is based off of this insight, a comprehensive insight from this tool, psychometric tool, to inform the development. And um, the second step, after you've identified what area needs attention, is now to reflect on it. So we also, in addition to giving feedback on the competences and the pillars, as part of taking our assessment, you receive a reflection or like an action plan template, which allows you to reflect after you've had a chance to read through the report and reflect on the insights, to be able to now plan. So what are you going to do about this insight? So we encourage people after they read this feedback that they get from the report to reflect on how it's showing up in their work, to reflect on what competencies they need to develop, also based off of what's important for them to achieve at that point and in that level and in their role. And so some of these like actions that one can take based on this insight is it could be personal actions. So it could be personally deciding perhaps that they're going to do something differently, that they're going to be more accountable, that they're going to um, perhaps seek a mentor. So it could be a personal action. It could be mentorship that is arranged by a company or by the individual themselves proactively. It could be coaching, and usually this report and this assessment is used in the context of coaching, training, or development. But then, of course, based on team team insight, for example, team level insight. If it's at a team level, it's been identified that they're both or they're all haven't mastered a certain competency, then it could be a team level type of intervention in terms of coaching, training, and etc. And so after, it's important that we get the insight about the level of mastery which we're operating at, and then we do something about it, because information is useful. This information is useful and it would be more valuable if something is done about it as opposed to just being evidence on paper. Because what happens is as well, and this is part of our philosophy of developing leaders at Zanga Metrics, is in different contexts, in different situations, you'll be often needed to lead differently based on the context, the culture that you're operating in, the demands of the role, the political um, the political environment at that time. And so taking this assessment is and the insight that you're able to gain about yourself at a certain point in time might not is not indicative of the maximum level. It's indicative of what you're going through at the time, and perhaps in a different timeline. So in a year, based on what you're encountering and what you are dealing with, it could be a whole different set of results. Right. And so it's just logical then that the third step to this is reflection. So after you have intervened, after you have reflected on and planned action that you're able to implement, then it's important as well that there is accountability to yourself in terms of reflection on the development or on the progress that you're making with regards to the competencies, with regards to your own um, the value that you're seeing or the changes that you're seeing in yourself as a leader based off of the insight and the actions that you took from the inside of the assessment. And so the assessment is designed to be an instrument that you can take. We recommend at least a year between the time you complete the assessment one time and the next. And what it can help you gain is insight into what competencies you've made progress in, what competencies perhaps you're now falling behind on and you need to um, prioritize based on how important it is to exhibit or to master those competencies based on the work that you're doing at the moment. And so with mindset and with the mental framework that leaders exhibit and use to address the work that they do, we're saying essentially that we have a tool that can help you reflect on and see how you're doing or your mastery in terms of these key competencies related to how you think or your conceptual framework of the world, and give you guidance on how you can improve it so you could lead better in that role and in that context. So what what does that mean? What can we do about it? Or what now? So some key takeaways from today's session that I'd like for you to remember and to take away from the session is that mindset is a very strategic leadership asset. And there's a lot of research that show companies spend a lot of money. There's a big budget on developing leaders, and mindset is understandably an area that they focus on a lot. And so it's very strategic. It's key that as a leader, you reflect on your mental framework as often um, as possible, and you're able to improve on it so that you can improve your leadership outcomes. And one thing that I would advise to stop is to stop assuming that your mindset will grow without focused effort. There are things that stretch our minds, neuroplasticity, as we experience them, but we have to be open to experiencing them. We have to be open to reflecting on what these events mean for us, and the lessons that we're taking away from these experiences. And so, without deliberate effort to reflect and to grow and to learn and to challenge ourselves, then we cannot assume that our mindset will grow to its fullest potential or to its best potential. And what I'd encourage you to all continue is using evidence-based tools to guide growth. So tools like this assessment that we offer at Zanga are great because they help you reflect and get insight beyond what you might be able to um, get if you were to reflect by yourself as an individual. And so tools that psychometric tools that are valid, reliable, um, are a great way to get insight into this key competency, this strategic and very significant competency that contributes to effective leadership. So that is it for me. I welcome you to take 2 minutes. It's been a pleasure, as always, to join you for this monthly webinar and to talk about the work that we're doing. Please take 2 minutes to complete the feedback form by scanning the QR code on your screen. And thank you.